You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmong Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guest today, if he's not the most well-liked public figure I've ever met, he's certainly in the photo. And that is former congressman, former senator, and former ambassador to the Holy See, Joe Donnelly. We're going to discuss a little bit of politics, a whole lot of Notre Dame football.
I'm up for that.
We are recording this on the day after Notre Dame defeated Penn State and the referees in the national semifinal. And we're joined, of course, as we often are, by the wonderful and talented Jim Shella.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who's known Senator Donnelly for a while. Thank you so much.
A little bit.
Now, wait a second.
Thank you.
I'm a bad host. Joe, representative, senator, ambassador.
Yes.
All the above work?
Yeah, just Joe works.
Joe and I were discussing our love of the McGinley's Golden Ace right before the podcast started. So let's start with that. Notre Dame game. I'm assuming you watched it from beginning to end. Joe is a Notre Dame graduate. He graduated in 1976 and then got his... No, you graduated in 77.
77, yes.
And then you got your law degree and graduated in 81 from
That's
Notre
right.
Dame. So
Yes.
you're a double domer.
Right. So interestingly, after the game, you know, a bunch of us 77 folks still talk to each other and everything. And one of my classmates sent everybody a video of him playing his trumpet out on his deck, the Notre Dame fight song. And everybody was like, God, you were so much better 45 years ago.
I wonder if our buddy Marcus Barlow got out there and played anything. He's a Notre Dame grad. He was in the band.
I wouldn't know.
What'd you think of the game?
This has been an unbelievable season. I mean, it's grit, determination, focus.
Yeah, you go from getting beaten by Northern Illinois
Right?
to playing for the national championship.
And Northern Illinois was the first game I was back for after 2.5 years at the Vatican. And I just looked and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is where we are, you know, and because there's such great hope. But we all still believe that, you know, those kind of things can happen. But we all looked at each other and said, look, we scuffed our toes once, and they have literally been on elimination since that game. If they lost one more, they were done. Right. And they've been on this amazing run. And Coach Marcus Freeman is, he just lights up a room when he walks in, and he's so focused. And
well, you got to love the fact that Brian Kelly left saying he wanted a chance to win a national championship, and he couldn't do it at Notre Dame. And 3 years later, Marcus Freeman is playing for one.
It's such a testament to Marky, right?
No comment. Anytime you want it.
That would probably be the first one of the day.
This is Jim Shella 2.0. It's completely different.
I live in South Bend, so we know all those folks pretty well.
Yeah.
And Marcus is beloved. He's such a good role model, and the players are, you know, they leave nothing on the field at this point. They may not be the most star-studded talent team, but nobody outplays them. Nobody out-hustles them.
What do you think of Coach Freeman's policy, reinstituting the policy of going to mass on game day. I thought that was just brilliant.
I think it's part of their tradition, and you don't have to be Catholic. It's just everybody coming together at that moment. In effect, besides being at this religious service, but they look at each other and it's like, we're in this together. We have each other's back. And if you know one thing at the end of this game, you'll know that I did everything I could for the rest of you.
I'd love to be there. I go to mass at St. John's downtown.
Yes. Yeah.
Father Nagel, if you're listening, you're the best. To be there for the sign of peace. It'd be interesting to see all those big men, all those people giving each other the sign of peace at the mass. And it seems like that has brought the team closer together.
This is a very close team. And Coach Freeman's, I think in large measure, the reason why. He is a player's coach, that he's deeply involved. If you've got a problem, everybody go see him. You know, that kind of thing, that they feel this is like maybe a big brother, surrogate dad, but he cares about me before he cares about my football ability.
But you also have to love the fact that every time he gets interviewed after a game, he says, I love this university.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the university, I read an article, it was either on The Athletic or in the New York Times, where they said, Notre Dame is the most likable team in the tournament, and that doesn't usually happen.
Well, they used to be the most hated team in the country.
I know. We did really well until we hit like the first exit in Ohio. Right.
Right.
I guess if you just go into Chicago, you'd be in great shape.
Yes.
But Coach Freeman himself converted to Catholicism several years ago, and
he did. He's just an extraordinary person who has embraced the town. As you know, like here in Indy, when a coach or a player or a team like becomes part of the community, like a Reggie Miller,
Right.
It's like Reggie still lives down the block to everybody who's here. And that's how everybody feels about Coach Freeman in South Bend is you see him at the supermarket, you see him, at the local coffee shop.
So this is being recorded the day after the 27-24 win over Penn State.
Yes.
This will be posted on January 20th, the night of the national championship game. Senator Donnelly, who will Notre Dame play, and how much will they win by?
I have no expertise on who they're going to play, but my guess would be our friends next door, Ohio State, because they've been doing so well in the tournament.
And why not? They appear to be the best team in the country at this point. Why not beat the best to become the best?
That's right. And they've been incredible. Or they had Oregon like 31-0 halfway through the second quarter. I hope we play them. They're our next door neighbor, and they're calling the field goal kicker Mr. January now, as opposed to like Mr. October
or Mr. May if you're Dave Winfield.
Right. And so. I'm picking Notre Dame on Mr. January putting one through the uprights at the end of the game.
Something else this week we were talking about before we started, and then I'll turn it over to Jim for some political talk, including maybe how sports and politics intersect so well. Jim, you're a great advocate of that, someone who covers both so well.
Yeah,
Senator
my dad.
Donnelly?
If my dad was still alive, he'd still be asking me, "Why don't you become a sports reporter?"
You were at the funeral of the 39th president, Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
Just yesterday.
I was.
And very kind of you to still appear on the podcast after the two big events.
Happy to do it.
What was it? Is that the first presidential funeral you've been to? And kind of what was it like? Because Carter, former President Carter, can legitimately be called different than his predecessors and successors.
He's different. I mean, he went a different path. And what's been incredible is that when he left the presidency, there are a lot of people going, well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. And probably at this point, I don't know that there's any former president more beloved than him because of how much he did for others. And the things they were talking about in the homilies and in the testimonials yesterday about how he worked in Africa to eliminate guinea worm disease. And, I remember in 2018 in South Bend, Mishawaka area, he came for a habitat build. And it was amazing. He came and, everybody wanted to say hello, and he was so kind and everything. But his favorite time was when he put on the tool belt and put on the hard hat and brought his hammer out and was working on the houses. And he leads by inspiration. It was terrific. I felt honored to have a chance to be there to say thank you to him.
Were you able? There's a little bit of an Indiana flavor at the funeral, as former Vice Presidents Dan Quayle and Mike Pence were there. Did you get a chance to say hi to either one?
I didn't, because they were kind of, for security reasons, I think, kind of segregated off. But I was privileged. Jim Banks and I sat with each other yesterday at the event.
Perfect segue to Mr. Shella.
And you had asked about the playing of Imagine with Garth Brooks. And I knew that Garth Brooks, he has stepped in as the follow-up to Jimmy Carter for Habitat for Humanity. So he's like picked up that banner publicly. And when the song started, I like to listen to music, but I'm not an aficionado, right? I can't tell this one from that one too often. Mm-hmm. So when they were playing Imagine, I thought to myself, that looks like Garth Brooks, but it probably is because of Habitat. And so I turned to Senator Banks sitting next to me. I said, Jim, I think that might be Garth Brooks. And he looked at me and goes, yeah. So I may have dropped like 2 levels in his opinion, but
is it somewhat, sorry, Jim, one more question. Is it somewhat inspiring to see like all the presidents all together? I mean, you don't have that with monarchies. You don't have that like with parliamentary systems where it's all this infighting your party leader. And so, but you had...
It's a pretty small club. But it also was entertaining for everybody yesterday, as they came in, who's talking to who. And again, I'm not over the top on that kind of stuff, but there were some folks behind me going, well, Obama's talking to Trump now and doing this and doing that, and who's shaking hands with who. But what was so interesting,
there was a headline that Karen Pence didn't stand up when Donald Trump shook hands with Mike. Yeah.
Well, Mike was very cordial and was very kind, and I know Karen's a wonderful person. But to see them all, who else knows the weight that they each carried on their shoulders? And it was funny that Obama and Trump were getting along really, really well, which reminds me of there's a story about Obama when he was coming in, and John Boehner was the Speaker of the House at the time, and the two of them were at an event. And Michelle Obama was there as well. And John Boehner was a notorious smoker.
Sure.
Barack Obama was an on-the-sly smoker for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so Michelle was sitting right next to them. And they made a joke with each other about it. And she gave him a look as if I never saw either of you again, it would be a great day.
It's funny.
And George W. Bush was kind of like the rambunctious kid. He's smacking Quayle with the thing, and he's slapping.
He's long been known as the guy you want at your barbecue in the backyard.
Well, let's talk about Joe Donnelly a little bit. You recently stepped down as ambassador to the Holy See.
Yes.
I'm not a Catholic. Tell me, what's the Holy See? What's the Vatican?
Sure. Well, the reason it's so important is that when Pope Francis or any pope speaks, they speak to the whole world. And so in the smallest village in Africa, on the furthest point in the most rural area in the smallest village, there may be a church, but there's certainly someone connected to the church. And the person that they respect more than anybody is Pope Francis. And so when he speaks, the whole world listens. And that's why it's important to the United States. It isn't a Catholic thing. The ambassador doesn't have to be Catholic. You represent United States foreign policy.
But the ambassador has always been Catholic.
Has always been Catholic, yes.
Yeah. And Callista Gingrich is who you replaced, is that right?
I did, yeah. She did a fine job when she was there, too. But the reason it's important is and it's like a UN post. for this reason, like the United Nations, because you don't do the visas. We're on the same compound as the U.S. Embassy to Italy, so they help take care of all of that stuff. Because we have people who still come and ask us for those things. And we combine like security folks with the U.S. Embassy to Italy, security folks, maintenance folks, all of that kind of stuff. But my main job was to make sure that Pope Francis and the people at the Vatican understood where the United States was on issues, to see how we could help them on problems or challenges that they might have. And so I would be asked by folks back home, they're like, well, where do you stand on this church issue or that church issue? And I'm like, I don't do church issues. Mm-hmm. I leave that to the bishops. I do Ukraine, I do Gaza, I do refugees. That's where we do our work.
How'd you get that job?
Well, interestingly, it goes back to President Biden, then Vice President Biden, then Senator Biden. We were very good friends, he and I. And a lot of it started in 2008, 2009, when we had the economic collapse. And I represented the 2nd District of Indiana, and it went down to Kokomo, from the state line with Michigan down to Kokomo. And so we had all the transmission plants. And when we had the economic collapse, we went from over 5,000 people working in those transmission plants to almost nobody. And they all lived in the same area. So every house, the mortgages on every house, they're all at the same bank. And I remember meeting with Mayor Goodnight and
Great
guy
from Kokomo.
Great guy. And he was the mayor at the time. I was a congressman, and we met with the economic development. And we're like, so what do we, how do we deal with this? And the conclusion was, of course, we have to make this place survive, because plan B is plan A. And Joe Biden also had a Chrysler plant in Delaware, and when he came in, he was then the sitting vice president. And a lot of folks said, we have to let Chrysler go. If you remember, there was like one plan to merge it into GM, which meant that would be the end of Chrysler. Another was just let it go. And a lot of folks in the state were like, we don't need it. And it's like, these are our neighbors. These are our friends. Those 5,000 are also the same people who go to the restaurants in Kokomo and who keep the businesses going in Kokomo. And Joe Biden, basically I begged on my knees to him at the time, saying, we really need to do this, but we need to do it in a way that can make it survive. And even in the Obama White House, it was 50-50. A lot of the economic gurus in the White House were like, no, this just doesn't add up. And a lot of the folks who had to deal with real people, the folks who had served in offices before, they got it. And so we said, so how do we make this that it's going to work? And so the union took a haircut. It was like, look, you want to make this? We can't make that anymore, but we can make this. And if we make this and have success, you can get a bonus back up. To the bondholders, you remember that was the challenge with the Indiana State Treasurer, was we needed the bondholders to agree. So we needed everybody to get on the page. And eventually we were able to do that. And, a few years later, we went from 5,000 to almost zero, and then back up to 7,000.
And built a new factory in Tipton.
And built a new factory in Tipton. And it was, every Jeep you see out there wouldn't be there if it wasn't for, the work that, in part, the work that Joe Biden did. So we became great friends over that. The Affordable Care Act, similar backgrounds. I think both he and I are second-generation immigrants. Our grandparents came from Ireland. And so I had finished up in the Senate, and I got a call, and it was from his folks. And they said, listen, he really wants you to be part of his team. What would you be interested in this? We want to know, because we don't want him to call you if you're not going to do it. And number one, if it's the president who calls and says, "Can you do this?" You do it.
Yeah, the rule is you can't say no.
That's right. If you say no, nobody ever speaks to you again, and you feel terrible. So I said, of course. And number two is he's a very good friend. I mean, in 2018, he came up to Hammond about a month before the election to the high school gym there. We had like 4,000 people there, and he leaned over. He goes, "This is the biggest crowd I've had since I was vice president." And the funny part, and you'll be stunned by this, Jim. So he said, "Listen, Indiana, isn't New York City politics wise, right? So here's the issues that are really important to us. And this is what, if you can talk about these, it would be," I said, "you being here is extraordinarily helpful. If you can talk about these, it would be amazingly helpful." And Pete Visklosky's sitting next to me. And so, former Vice President Biden, someday becoming President Biden, heads up to the microphone. He's got this huge smile on his face. And Pete leans over and goes, "What do you think?" I'm like, "I don't know." And then, of course, he talked about our issues a little bit, and then talked about what he was really interested in a lot. And he finished up. He came over. He goes, "Sorry, man."
I've tried to get Representative Visklosky on the podcast. I need to try again.
I'll help you with that. He's a wonderful guy.
I bet he's got stories too, and that's
Yeah,
what we
yeah.
love.
He was there a long time.
He and I were able to, and he was the primary point person. He and I worked together to get the dunes to become a national park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did Representative Donnelly play at all, endorse in the 2008 primary between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton?
Well, I did not till after Indiana voted, because I said I want to stay out.
Gotta be tough to do.
I want to respect the voters of the state of Indiana.
And after Indiana voted, the decision was
The
made.
decision was made. That's right. But before that, there's always a story behind this stuff, right?
Right.
So before that stuff, myself and another congressman from Washington State, we got a call from Dick Durbin's office, and they said, "Hey, Senator Obama would like to meet with you guys." And I'm like, I know what this is about, right? He wants the endorsement, because it's like 3 weeks before the election in Indiana. And so I get over there, and it was a congressman from Washington State. He and I sitting there looking at each other like, "Oh man," it's like you can't say no, but you're going to get your head beat in while you're there, right?
Right.
And so he came in, President Obama. Then Senator Obama comes in and goes, not a lot of small talk beforehand. He looks, he goes, "I need your endorsements." Like, we know. Thanks for letting us know.
Didn't really need the memo.
And it's like, he's looking at you like, no, you're not getting off that easy. And I said, here's my problem. I'm in a very difficult district. You alienate 3 people, you lose. We always used to laugh. We said a landslide for a Democrat is like a 1-point win, because that district leaned Republican by about 7 points. And I said, "Look, I support you. But and I will come out publicly the day after, but I will alienate literally half of the people who I need to try to win this election." He goes, "I don't need you the day after. I need you now." I'm like, "I understand." And so he just kind of gave me the look,
But did he understand? He's an elected official. He had run, statewide in Illinois. He understands politics.
He understood, but he wasn't in the kindness business at the moment. He was at the "I need your endorsement to win" business at that time.
Is it fair to say, Jim, because you obviously covered that primary in 2008, the Democratic presidential primary.
Best time for a political reporter in Indiana
Amazing,
ever.
right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But the 2nd District seemed to be a bit of a focus.
It was an incredible focus. So, he's working to get my endorsement. All my family goes to see him in North Liberty for a big event at the American Legion there. And he's got pictures with my wife, my daughter. They're all wearing Obama T-shirts. And my wife comes home, and I said, "How'd it go?" He goes, he's wondering where you are. And we told him we're all with him. And he said, yeah, I really like all of you. You may want to talk to the other person in your family. But he was reasonably nice about it. But so the election occurs, and, I then endorse Obama like the next day. That weekend, there's a parade, and it was in Rolling Prairie, Indiana. And true to exactly what I was saying, not a block into it, this lady who's up on her porch, she screams out, you, and she comes running down her front lawn. And I think, oh, this could be really nice. Maybe we helped her with a VA issue or something like that. That was not what it was. She told me, how dare you do that to Hillary Clinton? And you disrespected me. You disrespected her supporters. And I will not forget. And I also got that from the vice chair of one of our counties as well. And Haj Patel, who was the district director then at that time, the best, leans over to me. He goes, well, this is going very well.
Funny. You've been a congressman, you've been a U.S. senator, you've been an ambassador. What's the best job?
Oh, they're all incredible privileges. But what I always felt about that was the ambassador job. I received a call, and was honored to have the chance. And the House job, you work like a dog and you represent 1/9 of Indiana. But the Senate, I represented the whole state. And so that was the one that I loved. I loved the House. I loved them all. But with the Senate, I represented folks in Jeffersonville. I represented folks in Steuben County. And that was the amazing privilege of it. And to win in Indiana as a Democrat, I mean, literally 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, every single day. And one misstep and you're done. And so we work so, not a pat on the back or anything, but we work so hard all the time.
Well, I want to come back to that one misstep comment, but first, you started your first political office was school board member.
It was the Catholic high school school board, which was a unique experience because I did not run. Did not want to run, wanted nothing to do with it. I mean, my kids went to the school and I loved the school, Mishawaka Marian High School, but I got a call at home and it was from the head of the school board. And he said, hey, so-and-so just resigned and you've been elected to the school board. I said, I'm not a candidate for the school board. So thanks very much. I'll bring some Danish to you guys or whatever. But no, I'm so busy. And they said, no, you don't understand. We all got together and we made you the new member. I said, well, I can't. And they said, well, then you have to personally visit the bishop and you have to look him in the eye and tell him you refuse to serve. Honest to God, that's what they said.
Wow.
And I said, tell me what time the next meeting starts.
No kidding. Well, somebody told me once, and I don't remember who, that the two toughest jobs in politics are school board member and member of Congress.
Oh, man. The school board member was something else, because and I know how hard it is with the public schools, with the budgets and everything, but, our budget deal was, are we going to have enough to turn the lights on at the beginning of the year? So you had to hit a student number. And it was always, are we close? Are we getting there? That kind of thing. Then we had I'll tell you two other stories that give you a little bit of a flavor. We had the bishop was coming for the annual school mass at the school. And so the principal tells all the students, please dress very modestly. Like when we say very, we mean very, very modestly. And I'm the school board president at this point. And so, I've not heard anything about it. And so they have this, and he calls me up that night and he goes, we've got a disaster on our hands. I said, what? He goes, at the end of the mass, as the bishop is leaving, he turns to me and says, let me tell you something. I don't know what you're doing about the way these kids dress, but it is not like any school I've ever seen before type thing. And he said, so here's the deal. If you don't fix it by next Tuesday, I'm coming back to fix it myself. And he calls, he goes, you're the school board president. How are we going to fix this? I'm like, I don't get paid to put dress codes in place. And
Sounds like a call for uniforms to me.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And they just had all the kids from the school come in and just say, look, we have a code that we respect and we ask you to follow it. And so we called up the bishop and we said, we think we fixed it. And then we hung up the phone and we looked at each other and said, I don't know if we did. And the other one was in football season. We had a really good team. And one of our really good players had a truck, of course. He's from Indiana, right? And the truck was found, I think, by the South Bend police in the middle of a cornfield at like 3 a.m.
It's where everybody parks.
Right.
At least once.
So I got a call from the principal, and he said, hey, there's a rumor going around that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, like our 3 best players, were in the truck. They're like 17, and there were beer cans, there's this, there's that, and the police found it in a cornfield, and what are we going to do? I said, well, we have to find out what happened here. So we talked to the kids, and all the kids were like, we were at Johnny's house, and we came out and the truck was gone. And we got a call at like 3 a.m. that the truck was in a field. And so we were so grateful that we were able to get the truck back. And, and the principal,
straight face.
The principal looks at me and goes, what do you think? I said, I know what I think, but I said, what can I prove? Right.
Right.
And I said, this is what they've told us. Do I think it's probably correct? I'd probably bet my house it's not, but I can't go ahead and do something to these kids on the basis that this is what they say and their parents back it up. And so off we go. And like 10 years later, one of the kids is like, remember that? I said, don't tell me anymore.
I don't want to know.
I don't want to know what actually happened.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise. Our guest today, Joe Donnelly, one of the most distinguished public servants this state has ever produced. He's actually born in New York City on Long Island, which I didn't know until I did a little research. We are joined, of course, by a former Wish TV State House reporter, Jim Shella. How did you end up in Indiana?
Well, I went to Catholic high school on Long Island. My family, Irish immigrants. My grandparents, they settled in the ghetto, the Lower East Side Irish ghetto of New York. We laughed. We said it was, the last stop on the bus ride, and everybody had 5 cents, and so they all landed there. And so my dad, my dad and mom actually grew up in the same street in Lower East Side of New York City. And then, and this is again funny kind of because we're sitting here in Fountain Square and redevelopment and stuff. They eventually moved out to my dad eventually moved out. They had a little house in Brooklyn. And we all laugh and we go, why didn't you keep the little house in Brooklyn? Right? which is probably, we had an amazing ability to get real estate at some point and sell it before it was ever worth anything, But so we lived out on Long Island. My dad took the train to work every day. And my mom died when I was 10 years old. And so it was basically just school and baseball and that kind of stuff. And I went to the local Catholic high school and applied to Notre Dame, had never been here. I was dumb enough that I thought Chicago was in Southern Illinois. So that tells you my geographical challenges at that point in my life. But the goal, to all of us who are immigrant kids and this and that, I mean, here's this place that kind of was us. And so I applied and was accepted. And my father's like, do you know where this is? I'm like, yeah, I think so. It's kind of that way. You cross the George Washington Bridge and you're on your way. And my father, he's like, "You got in?" I said, "I did it." And so there's the story of like the next day, talk about times different. He wrote out a $25 check to hold the spot. And he said, once they cash it, they can't cancel you out. And so that was like his big thing was, I've got proof now that they can't not let you in. But it was, so many kids out in New York, New Jersey, all that area. Notre Dame was like the place. We literally, I didn't know about Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth. I mean, those were like places that actually were not like even part of our lives. I mean, kids like us didn't go there.
But as you're growing up, going from a young kid to a teenager, I mean, other than the Rockne and Leahy years, those were the prime Notre Dame football years with Parsegian winning the national championship in 66. He wins it again in 73. You graduate in 77,
right?
When they defeat Texas in the Cotton Bowl.
And my classmate was Joe Montana.
I was just getting ready to say that. Did you know? Did you have any classes?
I knew him a little bit. One of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. Great friends to everybody. And I couldn't speak more highly of the guy. And he was one of those guys who, if a team is like he was third string. He actually in his freshman year was seventh string quarterback. It was not the world's greatest practice quarterback, but you put him in the game and everything changes, And he was the kind of guy, he walked into the huddle and everybody in the huddle picked up their games by like 30, 40%. It's like, we got to protect Joe. We're going to protect Joe.
Were you at the green jersey game?
I was.
Against USC?
Mm-hmm.
So did you have any classes with Charlie Weiss?
No, I did
Former
not.
coach?
No.
But it's tough now in 2025 to put yourself back 50 plus years ago to understand that Notre Dame was the only national team.
And I remember with Joe, I laughed. Somebody said, well, what was it like having him in your class? I said, well, one of us had a brand new Pontiac Firebird with personalized license plates. And the other one had a 1966 Volkswagen that had no heat and the running boards fell off. So you have to figure out who had which car. But the thing for Joe is his mom and dad got it for him because he got a scholarship, and the money they had saved up, Joe held up his end of the deal. And so we all
was it a gift from a booster?
No, it was not in any way. And we all have always taken such great pride in what he's accomplished and how he stayed so close to the university.
Did you get to know Lou Holtz at all?
A little bit. Yeah.
Back to the misstep comment. You got elected to the U.S. Senate in a race against Richard Murdoch. And a lot of people believe that race swung on a comment that he made in a televised debate where it had to do with abortion and rape. I've got a Republican friend who says there were there was I've several, much to the chagrin of my wife.
Mark Lovers, are you listening?
But there were about 8 minutes left of the debate, and this Republican friend likes to say Richard Murdoch was 8 minutes from being a U.S. senator. Do you feel like that was the pivotal point in that race?
It was pivotal, but that morning, in my pollster was like the best in the business. He's terrific, and I had gotten a poll that morning of the debate, and it showed me up 1 point, and so it was a real horse race in every way, and we had everything in place to work it till the last moment. We had our fundraising in place. Running a campaign is sometimes like running 3 different businesses almost, the fundraising, the this, the that. So it was very close. And to tell you how good my fundraiser was, or my pollster. So earlier, like around June of that year with Murdoch, I was out trying to raise money somewhere, and I called up and he said, "Hey, I just got the poll." I said, "Okay." He goes, "You're 4 points down." I said, are you ever going to have a poll that shows me ahead? He goes, as soon as you're ahead, I'll have a poll that shows you're ahead. He goes, but you don't pay me to give you good news. You pay me to give you the real news, you know?
Right.
And so we were ahead by 1 point, and it got to the end. And the interesting thing about that, this is a story that almost nobody knows, is so it was the last question of the debate. Mm-hmm. And he had spoken. I spoke, and then he had the last word. And right after that were our closing statements.
Right.
And so he has the last word. And that's when he said it.
Unprompted.
Were you one of the questioners, Jim?
I was not. I was at home. Oh, you're covered. Watching.
Unprompted. But I'm getting my closing ready. So I missed it. Because I'm focused on I've got to nail this closing.
Sure.
We're in such a close race.
You're worried about what you're saying, not what he's saying.
Yeah.
Right. And so
And you certainly can't expect something like that.
no, and I thought, so I give my statement, he gives his, and I thought the debate went really well. And my daughter comes flying up to the stage because she's like 10 times smarter than I am in every way. And she goes, we need to speak to you right now. And I look and I go, I think I did pretty good. What do you mean? I said, I was really solid. And she goes, we need to talk to you right now. And my campaign manager comes up. He goes, we need to talk to you in the corner right now. I'm like, again, what on earth did I do wrong? Because that's your first instinct is always what train wreck happened, right? And then they explained it to me, and I go, he said, what? And they all looked at me like I had four heads, you know. I'm like,
because you were standing right next to it.
Yeah, I was working my business, you know.
Right.
And it was a pivotal moment. And the interesting thing is, right after that, we had the media time, and each of us had 10 minutes, and I went first. And I wanted the media to focus on those comments. So I talked about it for like 3 or 4 minutes with questions. And then I got a question about healthcare, the Affordable Care Act. And I really wanted them just to focus on that one thing. And I said, they're going to ask like 7 questions about other stuff. So I need to focus on this. So I start on this little riff about, well, you know, this guy I met in South Bend, I think his name is Eddie. And Eddie got care for the first time. I think it was, you know, he was having a challenge like with a heart condition. And my press secretary's in the back going like this, like, what on earth are you doing? She goes, because you're just like rambling and talking about Eddie who's getting health care. And I finish up and her hands are on her head like this.
That's what we do as press secretaries.
And she walked and we finish up and she was the best ever. And
who was it?
Her name is Lizzie Chappelle. And she's just a dear friend.
And your campaign manager was?
Paul Tencher, who was then the campaign manager for Gary Peters in Michigan.
And I think I know who your pollster is.
Yeah. And so Lizzie comes up and she goes, what are you doing? I said, here's what I'm doing. I want them only to focus on one thing. Nobody had any interest in Uncle Eddie or any cousins or anything. And they were not going to ask me any more questions about that. So we should have ended it at that. But I killed 5 minutes talking about Uncle Eddie.
And gave him nothing.
And gave him nothing. That's right. And she goes, aha. And then he passed. He didn't show up for his 10 minutes. And I like Richard.
He held a news conference the next day at state Republican headquarters, and the state Republican chairman left the building.
Yeah.
They moved the podium. You remember that?
Right, so you couldn't tell it was state Republican headquarters.
And I told everybody.
And the Murdoch campaign moved it back.
Right.
They did. I told everybody.
And that was after he canceled a campaign appearance that morning.
My phone blew up the night of the debate because I was doing TV work.
I mean,
so people were saying, hey, how are you going to, handle this?
Yeah.
And I just I couldn't figure out how to be helpful to Mr. Murdoch on this one.
Well, everybody was excited in the campaign. And I sat them all down. I said, listen, I said, he's going to hold a press conference tomorrow. and he's going to say, I said, here's what I would do. I'd say, look, you know what I meant. You know what was in my heart. It just didn't come out the right way. And so here's what I really believe. I said, and so maybe we'll pick up a point, but that's what he's going to do. And we have to keep our nose to the grindstone and double our efforts because it's going to be a 1-point race. But he didn't do that.
Yeah.
And
what he was trying to do, I mean, the fact of the matter is a Democrat doesn't get elected in Indiana unless they're pretty close to the middle. As Democrats go, you're pretty conservative. And he was trying to make sure everybody knew he was to the right of you.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, it was a pivotal moment. My college roommate, he called me up the next afternoon. And he was in Chicago. He was in Chicago on business. He was from Dallas. He and his wife, and he said she was in the bathroom getting ready for the day, and he's laying in bed, and he said he's watching the Today Show, and they go, "There's been a major development in the Indiana Senate race," and he said, "I called out to Bridget and said something either went really good or really bad."
Well, and that was also the cycle where you had multiple Republican Senate candidates say something.
Todd Aiken in Missouri.
Exactly. Right. I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So in 2012, though, and correct me, Jim, well, both of you correct me, when you announced that you were going to run for Senate,
yes,
after 6 years in the House, Richard Lugar was going for his 7th term.
He was.
So you had to think you were going to run against Richard Lugar, correct?
No.
You thought he was going to lose the primary
well,
or just
I thought
not run?
It was
because that was a fascinating decision for me was, man, Donnelly's going to run thinking he can beat Lugar, and that's never really worked out. So when Murdoch won the primary, how did all that kind of shake out?
Richard Lugar was like an icon to me too. I mean, he was the epitome of how do you serve our state in an honorable, solid way. But they had also redistricted me. And, through back channels, we had kind of communicated to the Indiana legislature, hey, just leave me alone. I love my district. I love serving my district. If you chop my district up, I said, then I am forced to take a look at serving the entire state.
And in your last race for the House, you had a close race against Jackie Walorski.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And it became her district.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of told that to the legislature through a back channel, and their comment back was, that's really entertaining. Thanks for letting us know.
So I can run a tough race for the House, or I can run a tough race for the Senate.
Exactly. And so,
or you could do neither and just say, I'm going to go back to law, or I'm going to do whatever.
But I loved serving in the legislature. And so we had actually, because we were expecting the legislature would do this, it was interesting. We had a Democratic pollster, a different one. We said, do you think you can try to figure out what a Republican primary electorate would look like? He said, yeah, I can do that. And it came back tied. And I said, does this electorate know that it's Senator Lugar? and he served us for 36 years. He should have been president. And he said, yeah. He said, this is a different electorate than it used to be. And Senator Lugar was, like I said, was the model. And that didn't count back then. It doesn't count now sometimes too.
Right.
Jim, go ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was an amazing race. I mean, first of all, Lugar was damaged in the primary by a residency issue. And so, the suggestion, it's like back when there was a residency challenge to Evan Bayh, the whole world said, how can you say Birch Bayy's son is not a Hoosier?
Right. Right.
But the Republicans said, well, it looks like this guy who was mayor of Indianapolis isn't a Hoosier.
Right. and who owns a beautiful farm and, the whole thing. Right.
Right. And it was amazing to me looking at how things had gone prior to that, because it was a different year, a different electorate.
And I knew. I mean, I knew if Senator Lugar had been successful. Somebody asked me one time. They said, "Well, what would you have done?" I said, "I would have toured the state and said hello, and I would have run the best race I could while being respectful to Senator Lugar, and would have lost by 10, 15 points."
Well, in 2006, his previous run for re-election, the Democrats didn't even run anyone against
That's right.
him.
I was going to say that happened a couple of times.
For good reason.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was kind of an open secret among Republicans, and I was working at State Party as communications director when you won in 6,
Yes.
that Murdoch wanted that. He was waiting to be elected to something, and he was elected to state treasurer, but he really wanted to run for that Senate seat. Is that fair to say, Jim, that even among the media, that was kind of an open secret?
Oh, I think that's right. And what's interesting is just how much of a disappearing act he's done since that Senate race.
Yeah. It was such a privilege. And let me tell you about Senator Lugar. I mean, my first, I had not served in a legislature before I was elected to the House up in South Bend. And so I didn't know all the niceties and the wherefores of Washington and the processes and this and that. So I'm in the first week of being in the House, and I revered Senator Lugar. And so I went over to his Senate office, and I show up, and they say, "Can we help you?" I said, "Yeah, I just got elected to the 2nd district in Indiana." They're like, "What? What are you doing here walking up to us? What would you like your chief of staff to talk to?" And I'm like, "I was just wondering if Senator Lugar happens to be in by any chance." And they're like, "Have you lost your mind?" Not in a mean way, but
Right.
It's like, I said, "I just wanted to say hello and tell him how much I admire him." And they said, "Well, he's actually at a vote or something." And like a little later, I get a phone call, and it was Senator Lugar. Mm-hmm. And he goes, why don't we go out to lunch or to breakfast?" He had his great spot in the Senate dining room. And it was like, man, I better shave, and we had breakfast together. And he said, it was at the time of Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was in flames, early 2007. And he said, "Look, we have really serious decisions to make here. Our young men and women are at risk every single day." And he said, "So any questions you have on what my team is working on this, or any questions you have on any other subject, you can ask me, and you never, ever have to worry about me telling anybody else what you and I are talking about, because we want to get our kids home safe. We want to get this thing solved, and you can count on me." I said, "Oh, that's incredibly kind of you." He goes, "I hope you would do the same for me." I said, "I don't think you'd be calling me for advice."
Did you have any, I worked on a pro-Lugar super PAC.
Yes.
In 12 in the primary. We ended up losing. Did you have any conversations with Senator Lugar after November, after you had won his seat?
We had multiple conversations. I considered him a very dear friend and a mentor. And so I reached out to him for advice the entire time I was in the Senate. I mean, the entire time. He was so generous. We'd go to lunch, we'd go to breakfast. I'd say, "What do you think about this? What about this?" I'll never forget, part of what I did was work on the nuclear proliferation issue, because that's what Senator Lugar worked on. And I was the ranking Democratic member on Strategic Forces, not to get too technical, but it's a subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. And it involves nuclear weapons, missiles, all of that kind of stuff, which tied into what Senator Lugar had done. And so I was over in Eastern Europe because we were trying to make sure there wasn't going to be any dirty bombs sneaking through to Syria or to those areas. And there was like a highway from, if it was going to happen, it was going to be old Soviet materials that were in barns and stuff that people took out because they knew it was going to be worth something. And Senator Lugar worked on all of that. And so I was trying to follow up a little bit on what he was doing. And we were in Tbilisi in Georgia. And the facility there that worked on these issues in Tbilisi, Georgia, was the Richard Lugar Center.
Your path, also your political path, your career path. Two other very prominent Hoosier senators, Evan Bayh,
Yes.
and I have to say my personal favorite because he's the first politician I ever worked for, and that's Dan Coates.
Yes.
What was it like? What's your relationship? They've both come on the podcast. They were incredible
couldn't be
guests.
better. It couldn't be better. And it's interesting because we've all become very good friends. Evan and I, for obviously on the Democratic side, we work together on so many issues, health care, the cap and trade. Evan called me up and goes, "You don't want to go near this thing." I'm like, "Thank you very much." And because they never even voted in the Senate, Evan said, "We're not even going to vote. So don't hoist yourself on a petard for a vote that's never even going to happen in the Senate." We talked to each other a whole lot, and we still do. And his wife Susan was the best in every way, and the boys are incredible. The boys both served in our military, and are both here in the state. And his son Nick is working with the Colts, and his son Bo is working with. I think it's Judge Hamilton as a law clerk.
And you also have Todd Young.
Yes.
Dan Coates, Republicans. The Republicans and the Democrats have a history in Indiana of working really well together.
It was always true the whole time I was there, almost hand in glove. Dan Coates and I actually were at Indiana Wesleyan just a few months ago doing a present. They asked us if we would do a presentation there. And he's always been a wonderful friend. He's a huge Notre Dame fan too, by the way. So he's always like, "Hey, what do you think?" I'm like, "I hope we win."
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, in the U.S. Senate, you devoted a lot of your time to dealing with veterans issues, specifically the efforts to limit veteran suicide.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, it kind of goes back actually to when I was first running for the House. We had almost no services in our district for veterans. Not because there was any desire not to provide it. It just didn't. We just didn't. If you wanted to get help, you went to Fort Wayne. And Fort Wayne in January on US 30, in a blizzard is a really tough way for. And they used volunteer vans from the VFW, the American Legion, were kind enough to provide. I said, this is not the way this thing should be. And so the veterans came up and they said, look, in such a nice way, they said, can you help us? So started with that. We became very, very close to make sure they could get the services they deserved. Our state serves at just about, our National Guard serves at like 4 times the national average. We are a very, very committed state to serving our military, to keeping our country safe. And that was a huge part of the job. The suicide part is, we knew it was a problem, and we lost a young man who was from over in the Muncie area. And he was on his second tour, I think it was. Had finished his first tour, was on his second tour. And told his dad everything's great. And then took his life because he was home on R&R on his second tour. It was incredibly dangerous. And it's like, in 2 days you're going back. And he took his life. His name was Jacob Sexton. And we got a letter from his dad. And the letter said, I miss my son every day. I want to explain to you what happened. This shouldn't be happening. And that was the active duty. So on the armed services, we work nonstop to get it so that you're not afraid to go get screened, that it won't affect your career. You won't have to worry about, hey, I'm not going to get a promotion, that everybody's entitled to a screening every single year, that there be training for all of the leaders of the military that they understand, and they're working hard to stop that. And on the veteran side, we lose 21 a day. And, we had them, and I understand how they felt. They would be over in Iraq and in Afghanistan and those who served in Vietnam and Grenada and Desert Storm and Desert Shield. It would be, you have his back and you have her back, the ones right next to you. And then you come home and people are like, you cut in front of me in line at Chick-fil-A. It's like, well, what? Yeah. I ate MREs in 20-degree weather in the mountains of Afghanistan. I didn't mean to cut in front of you. It's like, it's two different worlds.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to reacclimate. And so, taking that 21-0 has been a passion of mine.
You got legislation passed.
Yes.
There's a big discussion in national politics now about how it's an outside game rather than an inside game, that people are getting ahead on Capitol Hill by using social media and going to the media instead of actually accomplishing things within the legislative body. Quite clearly, you were interested in the inside game.
That's right. We're not very clever sometimes, but we had nicknames for them. We called them the frequent flyers, who would be on TV every night. Didn't matter the issue. I'll never forget one person who basically had no connection to the Agriculture Committee at all, and we passed this incredible farm bill that was so important to Indiana. And I'm trying to get a couple minutes. This was when I was in the House to speak on it, so I could tell all the ag community, hey, here's what we did. I'll be home to do this, to do that. And committee chairman Colin Peterson at the time was a dear friend. He goes, hey, bear with me. I got to bump you back a little bit. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, well, so-and-so. I said, well, they don't know an apple from an orange. And he's like, yeah, I know. But they want to speak on it. Because they want their time. Mm-hmm. And so they spoke, but right before they spoke, they went up to Colin and they said, what should I talk about? Colin's like, this is my world, right? The people who get things done are the ones who, and you know who they are because you all work with each other every day. You know who you can work with. I was very lucky in Indiana that every partner I had in the Senate was always focused on the job, always focused on the work. Dan and Todd and I know Evan and Senator Lugar and all of them. It was just, we were just really blessed.
We have a few minutes left with former Senator and Ambassador Joe Donnelly. We are joined by our good friend Jim Shella. A couple political questions very quickly that hopefully won't be too rough. Every time there's a discussion, including on this podcast, about how the Democrats can come back in Indiana, your name is mentioned. Is that flattering, or is it like that was a previous life, guys?
No, that's flattering. I mean, it's, the governorship was mentioned, but I had made a commitment to President Biden. And, I gave him my word. And so it kind of makes it so that you do what you promised you would do. And I had the G7 coming up where President Biden was going to be meeting with Pope Francis. So my job was to make sure that got done well. So it's very flattering, when as a party, we do the things that the people of this state care about, are focused on, we have success. Like, I think James Carville is the one who said, defund the police may be the 3 stupidest words ever spoken in the English language. You talked about where I grew up. My one uncle was a New York City policeman. My other uncle was a New York City fireman. Both of them served in the military. My dad served in the military. We lost a cousin right near Okinawa. My uncle was wounded in North Africa. And I always felt like when folks talked about the police, I was like, the greatest gift we can give to the areas that have violence and challenges is to make it so they know they can sit on their porch at night and be safe. That's the gift that you can give them. That I always talked about, a gentleman who maybe bought his house in the 70s here in town. And his dream was, this is going to be the biggest investment I ever make, is those mortgage payments. And when I retire, I want to sit on my porch and smoke a cigar and see the kids in the neighborhood play in the street. That ought to be what they should be able to do every single night. And the police and the fire and the local community and the neighbors make sure that can happen.
Much of the discussion about the parties these days, and this is a perfect opportunity for Jim to weigh in, given he's covered both parties for so long in his career, is the Republican Party is no longer the party of Mitch Daniels. And the Democratic Party, is no longer the party of Joe Donnelly and Evan Bayh. So leaving the Republicans aside for a second, for the Democrats, what's the path for, you got a new state chair who's getting ready to be elected. You have all these things going on. Is there, a lot of people say, look, we got to be more progressive and we got to be true to who ourselves and our philosophy. Other folks say, oh, that sounds great, but you're not going to win elections. And that's what we need to do.
Well, you don't actually get to have an effect on policy unless you win the election. And one of the biggest challenges we have is what works and what's important to people in Massachusetts, no disrespect to them, is not who we are here in Indiana. We're all national parties and everything, but in 2010, in that election that you said was so close, one of the things I talked about was they tried to go after me on border issues. But it was pretty clear I had been to the border, visited the border, supported efforts, and said, look, I'm the grandson of an immigrant, but my grandparents did it the legal way. And so all we ask is that you do it legally. If you don't do it legally, that's not the way it should be done. People understand that, and people respect that. And that's because we have laws for a reason. And so on issues like that, I think that's really important. Making sure you're safe in your neighborhoods is really important. Making sure that we stand up for our workers. You remember the carrier situation that we had. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the state government was basically, oh, well, the union made it so that it was too expensive to work here. And the actual truth was the union met and said, we will make it so that it doesn't cost you a dime to stay here. The Democrats, we were all 100% behind those people picking up a lunch bucket and going to work every day. When we're behind the union workers, the people picking up a lunch bucket, when we do that, when we stand with our brothers and sisters who want to make sure our communities are safe, that's who we've always been. That's how you have success.
You got a few more questions, Jim?
Well, you got all the talking points. Are you done running for office?
I'm not running for anything right now.
But you're not ruling it out?
I actually feel younger than I felt in a very, very long time. Pope Francis has that effect on you. Okay. You will have eternal life. I'm like, how about a couple more years here?
Yeah, who would want to leave Rome?
Well, that's funny because people were like, why do you want to leave Rome? I said, I'm going home to Indiana. And people used to kid me. They said, we don't call it the U.S. Embassy to the Vatican. We call it the Indiana Embassy to the Vatican. And occasionally some people come from other places as well. But we had so many funny stories. We can do another podcast just on those. But we had a person one time who called up and said, my assistant came in because she kind of smirks. She goes, it's always someone from Indiana. I said, that's what makes it so great. Yeah. When she comes in, she goes, we got a call from a guy from Indiana. I said, yes. And she said, he's in Germany today. It's a Monday. And I said, okay. And she said, well, he said he was with a group of businessmen from northern Indiana who came to visit you when you were senator. I said, those groups were like 80 people. And she goes, yeah, he said there are a lot of folks there. I said, well, what does he need? And she said, well, he would like to renew his wedding vows with his wife. And he'd like Pope Francis to do it. and he was wondering if Pope Francis is available this Wednesday afternoon. And she looked at me with a snarky look and said, "What would you like me to tell him?" I said, "Ask him if he'd like 3 or 4 p.m."
And we'll find somebody, maybe not the Pope.
That's right. I can put a hat on and pretend I have the whatever.
If Abdul can dress as the Pope,
that's right.
Anyone can.
There's a scary thought for you.
Yeah. You're teaching at Notre Dame
I am.
now?
It's been great. I taught foreign policy last semester. I'm going to be teaching U.S. government policy this semester.
One class? You're an adjunct professor?
Class, yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. What's in the future for you?
Well, I also work on solar energy efforts for a local South Bend company that's kind of punching way above their weight and trying to. I've always believed in all in American energy, that when we buy it from here, it really helps our economy, our country. And so I worked with them when I was in the House and in the Senate. And they came and said, "Hey, could you help us out?" And so I do some of that. And then I work for the Aiken law firm, and I work with them to provide advice to clients.
Okay. And that's the long-term plan?
I'm hoping that I'm around next year as the long-term plan. Who knows?
Do you have any thoughts on? We didn't talk about the 2018 senatorial run too much because there's really not a lot to talk about. It was a tough race for you. I worked for Luke Messer in the primary, so I was hoping that Luke would win. Mike Braun wins the nomination, then he wins in November. Just a couple of months ago, he was elected governor. Have you had any conversations with him?
I have not, but I wish him well. What was so difficult in that race was the whole Supreme Court thing was basically timed exactly to the last day, the last minute that Justice Kennedy left. It was basically, I think, more targeted at going after Claire McCaskill and myself and Heidi Heitkamp than anything. And before that, when I was Senator Joe, everybody was voting for me. But when an issue like that comes up, people go to their corners. Yeah, they go to their traditional party thing.
Their muscle memory.
And all of a sudden, you're not Senator Joe, you're the Democrat senator.
It's tribal politics.
And that becomes really hard. And we still almost won. But, what are you going to do? I wish Governor-elect Braun the best.
Let me ask you about one more person before we get to the 5 questions we ask everybody. Do you want to ask in the 5 questions, Jim?
Feel free. It's your show.
No, I'm not going to invest in your podcast. But I want to. I just know the cost is so high.
I eliminated that question early. Whenever we interview Mitch Daniels, the first thing he says, "Vane, you making any money off your podcast?" No. Let me ask you about somebody else. And we did a podcast on him, and Jim was a participant. I've always said that if there were the two, leaving Andy Jacobs aside because he was the greatest, and there were 2 Democrats who I wished were Republicans. One is you, and the second one is Joe Kernan. Tell me about your friendship with Joe Kernan. What he was like.
I love Joe. He was the best of the best of the best. And Joe was also, his wife was even better than him, Maggie, who we see and is just loved by everybody. And Joe, POW, fought for his country in Vietnam. Spectacular baseball player at Notre Dame.
Catcher.
Beloved by everybody. His word was his bond. Was a deeply loyal person to Frank O'Bannon in every single way. He couldn't have picked a better person. And Joe is sitting upstairs in heaven, and probably God is telling him to clean up his language at the moment.
He was a singular Hoosier.
Yeah.
I really wish. I didn't know him. I've met him a couple of times and had decent conversations. I actually wear his POW bracelet.
He's a real working class guy. You know what I mean? He was that lunch bucket type of guy who was a great mayor for South Bend too.
I did, usually on the 6 o'clock news, I would do live shots from the State House where I would be next to the railing over the rotunda on the 4th floor. And he would leave work on the 3rd floor, the lieutenant governor's office, and he would look up and see us up there, and he could whistle like nobody could whistle. When he was leaving at night, he would see us and he would whistle in an attempt to get that on TV. I don't think he was ever successful.
He was a great role model in this way too, and it was for him, for me. I never asked about politics of anybody. It's just like, how can we help you? How can we get something done? Plymouth, Indiana, Marshall County, about as Republican as it gets.
Mm-hmm, right.
They got, when there were still earmarks, we helped get a bridge because the challenge was, how do you get across US 31 in this area if somebody has a heart attack and they have to get over to the hospital? When they told us that, it's just like, well, this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And that's how it used to be, was nobody ever asked anybody. I mean, Dan Coates never asked me about that stuff, and Todd didn't either. And it's just like, how can we make Terre Haute better? How can we make Richmond better? That was it.
May I ask you a very quick question about another Notre Dame grad?
Yeah.
Mr. Michael Browning, who is a former podcast guest. He was terrific on the podcast. Another Patriot.
Talk about a gravel voice, right? I love Michael.
He's got hair like Fabio, and he has a great voice. And what's your friendship like with him? He was terrific on the podcast.
He's another mentor to me. He's just as good gets. Michael was always famous for going, so that's what you're going to do? Well, did you think about this? And I go, okay, let's sit down and talk about that. And I love him and his whole family. They're just the best.
He graduated from Notre Dame in 1968.
Yeah.
He told us the famous story of his mother handing him his induction notice on the day he graduated from Notre Dame.
Congratulations.
He was it wasn't a cake.
Greetings.
He was a very forthcoming, very pleasant, very enjoyable guest on the podcast. Not only because of his military service, but another one. What is it? How can we make Indianapolis better?
Whole life was dedicated to making the city a better place.
We've reached the point on the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Congressman, Senator, Ambassador Donnelly, are you ready?
For what?
You ready for these questions?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought that was the question.
That's 1A. What was your first job?
Oh, my first job was as a stock boy. And my dad had a little business. And he said, you're coming to work with me this summer. I said, okay, that's great. So like toward the end of the week, I said, so what do I get paid? He goes, you're my son. Here's lunch money. I'm like, I don't know that was legal, but that was the deal. He usually gave me like $20 a week.
How old were you?
I was probably 13, 14.
Did he live? Your mother died when you were 10, you said?
Yeah.
Did he live long enough to see you elected to?
He did not. No. But he would have been the most surprised human being on the face of the planet. Because I was the 5th of 5. So it's like, I think family vacations were, they realized like 80 miles into the drive whether I was in the car or not. So.
Hey, I'm one of 7. We left one of my sisters in the Black Hills once.
Totally believable.
We were 20 miles down the road, and they said, where's Beth?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they think they got everybody in the car, and then, maybe they don't.
Yep.
It's like the Mitch Daniels joke he used to tell. He's got 4 daughters.
Yeah.
He said the first daughter swallowed a quarter, and we took her to the emergency room. The last daughter swallowed a quarter, and we took it out of her allowance.
Absolutely.
Number 2, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Bruce Springsteen, because I'm sorry, Chuck Berry. And it was as a freshman at Notre Dame, because it was, my childhood was basically, it was my dad, after my brother, he was 2 years older than me, went off to college. It was just my dad and I, and it was just like, he didn't get home till like 6 or 7. And so I better be in the house and better be studying and that kind of stuff. And so, I was socially challenged, as you might say. And so I got to Notre Dame, and I think it was like $4. And Chuck Berry was the concert, and it was after the Northwestern. It was our first football game of the year. Oh. And we won 44-7, I think was the score. And Chuck Berry up on stage, I'll never forget him saying, he goes, man, when they told us we were about to land, we landed. And by the time we landed, you guys scored another touchdown.
If you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
It would probably be Lincoln and His Generals.
T. Harry Williams?
I think so, yeah. I
Harry Williams.
love Abraham Lincoln because so much was thrown at him, and he never gave up, and he just kept trying. And how many generals did he go through to save our country, right?
6 in the Army of the Potomac.
Right. They were generals, but they just didn't fight very well. And I think, what's the famous line with General Grant? A lady came up and said, I hope you know your general is a drunk. And he goes, well, then maybe we ought to have the rest of them drinking as well. Something like that.
Classic.
Yeah.
I've done several Lincoln podcasts. I'll send them your way.
Oh, I love that.
Scholars like Harold Holzer and Michael Burlingame. Incredible scholars.
I'm not a scholar, but I sure admired the guy.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
It would probably be to hear Jesus preach.
Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah.
It's a popular one.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you think about it, and it's. I remember being over in Israel on a trip to the Middle East. It was like Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we stopped in Israel. And you sit there and you go, this is like the place.
Yeah.
Right?
Last question. If you could, and this is kind of tougher for you because you've had dinner with so many amazing people. But if you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record to chat about anything you want, whom would you choose?
Right now, I would choose Vladimir Putin. And I'd want the 2 hours to say, what on earth are you doing? Yeah. Like you're destroying your own country. You're destroying this country. We have not the slightest interest in taking 1 square inch of your country. Nobody does. All you're doing is killing everybody's sons and daughters. Please stop. And I actually think Trump has that opportunity. That's the unique thing. He can have like the Nixon to China moment.
Sure.
He meets with Putin and says, listen, you need to end this. Putin says, no. Trump then looks at him and goes, fine, I'm going to give Ukraine twice as much. The war ends that moment. That's how you end this war.
You have been listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast, sponsored by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister.
Wow. Thank you so much. It was such a privilege.
Well, I want to ask you about one other person because I want to give him thanks besides Jim.
So it was over, but it's not over.
Well, I have to give Peter Hanscom. Do you want to make a comment on him?
Peter is one of my closest friends. Just an extraordinary person. Was my campaign manager in 2018. Did such an extraordinary job. There are no words to describe the challenges we faced. He told me, he laughed one time because we did a 42-city bus tour. And I love this place I'm going to tell you about, but it was a 42-city bus tour a couple weeks out. Somebody said, what was the most challenging city, the most difficult one you were in? I said, Bloomington.
Which should be the most welcoming for a Democrat,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, and on election day, we got our highest percentage there, but you paid for every point. And Peter laughed. He goes, oh, I didn't expect that.
Well, I reached out to Peter to secure your appearance on the podcast.
Love him and his family.
So, Peter, thank you very, very much.
Peter's now in the media, correct?
He was at Mirror Indy. Yeah, I think the foundation.
Okay. All right. So
Jim,
he's not actually.
Thank you very much for being a guest.
Great to be here. Great discussion.
Thank you very much. It's a
Thank
real
you.
privilege.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.